Thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify here. And the best thing for me to do after going after the opposition is just to walk through very quickly some of the comments that were made with respect to this very important resolution. I'm here in Des Moines. I've been to Cheyenne many times because I know that the answer to the problems facing Washington are not found in Washington. And the founders put you folks at the top of the food chain in this Constitution. And for a long time, you actually ruled Washington, D.C. After the 17th Amendment, when you gave up the right to appoint United States senators, that changed. People say, don't mess with the Constitution, that this thing is perfect. Well, it's been changed, not just changed by constitutional amendment, but it's been changed by court decisions. Yes, that 2,600-page document is the Constitution we live by. And the way you change that 2,600-page document is to change the underlying amendments to underlying text of the Constitution. You can't change it other than through court decisions otherwise. And so it's important to understand that you have the power to actually shape the future of the country. And in fact, the founders wanted you to do it. They gave you this power, and they were not the least bit concerned about a runaway convention. Why? Because conventions that require 3/4 of the states to ratify anything that comes from the convention is inherently the hardest thing to do in this country. There's no governing body that has a 3/4 majority necessary. I even challenge Wyoming, which has a super duper majority of one party. How many bills would pass in the Wyoming legislature that 3/4 of the members had to vote in favor of it? The reality is it's hard because it should be hard. What's not hard is for, unfortunately, the left in America to change the Constitution by constitutional amendment through Supreme Court edict. That's what's been happening. The left has no desire to have a convention of states. They don't get their amendments in the Constitution from the bottom up. They do it from the top down. They're not going to take over anything. They don't want to take over, and they don't need to take over anything. A runaway convention is simply a myth. And they also say that, well, Congress doesn't pay attention to the Constitution as it's drafted. The reality is, if you look at the amendments, there have been 17 since the founding. Every single one of them is adhered to. There's only 2 terms for a president. Senators are not appointed by the legislature anymore. There's an income tax in this country. You go on down the list, they're all adhered to, and frankly, they're all adhered to faithfully. The reality is that if you need, as you do, to pass a constitutional amendment, if you have 34 states gather to call for a convention, 50 states gather, 26 of them propose amendment, and then 3/4 adopt it, you've got a consensus in America. And no court, no Congress is going to buck that consensus, and they never have in the history of our country when it came to a constitutional amendment. The idea that this is something that's dangerous is a creation of the left that unfortunately some of our side have decided to adopt. It's not real. The reality is that this is something that is necessary. I always use the illusion that the country is on fire. If anybody doesn't believe that we're facing a fiscal crisis with almost $37 trillion in debt, when I left Congress, it was 6, and now it's 37. If you don't, please raise your hand if you don't think we're headed to a fiscal collapse. Raise your hand if you don't think that there's a tyranny occurring in Washington and grabbing power away from the people in the states. In a simple word, the house is on fire, and you folks are standing across the street looking at a house on fire, and you're worried that a car may come across and hit you on the way to put the fire out. Don't worry about a car that may or may not come across the street when you know for sure that the problem is real and this country needs your help. So I encourage you to pass the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Representative Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Senator Santorum for being here today. In your opinion, so Wyoming is a special state. It is the least populated state, and in this system, a proposed system for a convention of states, would you agree that this elevates Wyoming's voice in a disproportionate way to other states?
No question about it. It's the only forum that you will have where all decisions are being all decisions are being made. You have a Senate, obviously, which Wyoming has, quote, disproportionate representation, but anything that comes through the Senate has to pass the House, which has proportional representation. This convention of states is simply one state, one vote at every step in the process. The 34 states that are to call the convention, each state gets one vote on doing that. At the convention, 26 states, each state gets one vote. And at confirming and ratifying, 38 states, each state gets one vote. There is no better forum for the state of Wyoming to see its issues being raised than in this forum. And people say, well, we don't know that it'll be one state, one vote. And the answer to that is, yes, we do. And the reality is that prior to 1776, all the states' meetings were held by a convention of states because we didn't have a central government. So there were literally dozens of conventions of states. And by the way, every single one of them was one state, one vote. The convention called in Annapolis in 1786, one state, one vote. The one that was at Annapolis called for a broader convention that was held in Philadelphia in 1787, one state, one vote. Since the Constitutional Convention in 1787, there have been almost 20 regional conventions of states called by the different states. The Colorado River Compact was decided by a convention of states. California got one vote, Colorado got one vote, Utah got one vote, etc. They've always been. And so you say, well, what does that mean? What it means is that here, I'm in Iowa. Iowa, when they convene, they have no rules. Well, how do they know what to do? Precedent. Precedent is how it's governed. Almost every body in the country starts their session like Congress. They have to vote for a speaker first. Is there a rule that says it? No, but there's precedent that says it. And that's how you start. Now, will California and New York try to change it to make it proportional representation, proportional voting? Of course they could try, but there's 3 times more small states than there's big states. By the way, they tried at the Constitutional Convention in 1787. They were voted down, and they'd be voted down again. And that's why Wyoming is king at this convention.